Okay, hazardous materials. So certain things are too either toxic,
Oh, I got that one right.
or ignitable, corrosive, or reactive. Now, when I say toxic, there's a lot of potentially toxic things that are thrown in the garbage. I'm talking about things that contact with it is going to poison you. Things like radioactive materials, things that if they're directly inhaled, etc., they can cause immediate death from doing that. These are things that are, by law, required to be separated out from the landfill for obvious reasons. You can't just have them being run over by tractors and stuff like that, or be out there getting exposed to the environment and that type of thing. There's a number of different things that can be done to take care of these substances. Some things, for example, like radioactive waste, cannot be made less toxic, and therefore you just kind of have to encase them. A lot of times they will encase them in concrete or even glass. Glass is used a lot of times because glass is very non-reactive with a number of different substances, and it's actually very, very tough material when you have a very thick supply of it. So glass and concrete are very common things to use for just simple encasement of substances. That's what they do with nuclear waste. Then there are some things that can be chemically neutralized. That they have a counterpart, a chemical counterpart, that when you mix it with that particular substance, they will become less dangerous or less toxic, etc. Of course, acids and bases is a common example of that. There's a number of organic substances that can be broken down with enzymes and other chemical treatments that cause them to be less of a problem, whether it makes them less toxic or reactive, or maybe just makes it so they won't spread out. Some things are mixed, not just encased in concrete, but some things are just mixed with concrete because then the concrete keeps it from dissolving or spreading around and things like that, even though it's still a toxic substance in there. If it's an organic substance, many of your organic things can be taken care of by burning them. Now, this is important that they're done under the right conditions. So this is when they're taken to a special facility to do that, not just burned in a regular incinerator, because it has to be completely enclosed and everything, and also it is taken care of at very high temperatures with a lot of oxygen. And if you remember when we talked about air pollution control, we talked about the fact that burning your materials, organic materials, at high temperatures with a lot of oxygen will cause it chemically to be completely broken down into carbon dioxide and oxides of whatever other substances are in there. And then a lot of those, then like metals, potentially hazardous metals and things, will become ash that can be separated out when you do that as well. So incineration under very controlled conditions and at very high temperatures with lots of oxygen is an effective way to handle a lot of them. This also, by the way, I want to make sure you understand, these are not just hazardous materials that we've got control of. We need to find something to do with this. These also applies to chemical spills and things like oil tanker leaks and things of that nature, or perhaps a big tanker truck of hazardous materials wrecks on the roadway, or as you know, one that leaks out in the Gulf of Mexico or some other place like that, and they get out into the environment. There's some things we're going to talk about here of ways of dealing with those types of hazardous materials in the environment. And one of them, like I said, with like an oil spill, a lot of times they will burn as much of that off as they can, and that actually helps to get it out of the water and turns it into carbon dioxide and goes up in the atmosphere. There is also, you can use organisms, and we do that, we call it remediation. Now I'm going to take biological. You're on the right track there, so I'll go ahead and give you the point for it. We actually call it bioremediation. And sometimes proteins are used, so I guess I'm feeling generous. And by the way, who wrote that for Group 4? That's very fancy looking handwriting there. I like that.
It was me, actually. Alright, just kidding.
Using bacteria, though, that's the most common thing that's used in bioremediation is using bacteria. Bacteria are basically little chemical factories. When we look at it from in the biological world, There's bacteria for practically any kind of chemical reaction that takes place, particularly with organic substances. There's bacteria that will eat petroleum. There's bacteria that will even separate out and eat or incorporate stuff like mercury and lead and radioactive substances into themselves and therefore remove it from the environment. Bacteria can also be engineered to genetically engineered to be able to break down and either decompose hazardous waste or make it so that it's no longer as hazardous. And so the process of using that bacteria to do that is called bioremediation. And a lot of times these bacteria will be engineered so that they can only live off of the hazardous waste you're trying to get rid of, so that when they're done with their job, they will die. You won't have these new bacteria that you've introduced to the environment. That's always a problem when it comes to using organisms to try to take care of an environmental problem, is what will those organisms do once they're done taking care of that problem. And in this case, like I said, a lot of times they will go ahead and engineer it such that that's the only thing that they can eat is the hazardous waste. So once they're done with that, they're gone as well. So a lot of use of organisms in that respect, of bacteria. Also the enzymes of those bacteria, that also comes in that category. Usually the bacteria, the way they're breaking down these things is with enzymes. These are protein type catalysts that are very effective at doing things. And so using that by itself, sometimes it's rather than putting the bacteria in there, they'll get the enzymes from the bacteria and apply that. A lot of times those are used on oil spills and things like that, or just things that are spilled out into the ground and into the soil and stuff. And of course, part of the benefit of this is you can spread these things out. You can put them out in the soil or out in the water without completely disrupting. Otherwise, if you had to use any of these methods, you'd have to actually dig it up and take it out. And of course, that can cause a lot of environmental disruption by doing that. Okay. A very similar process known as phyto. What does phyto mean? Not light, that's photo.
No.
I know, poo. Yeah. Phytoplankton. What kind of plankton are you've got zooplankton and phytoplankton. There's two types of plankton. One is like a blank that you find at the zoo or zoo, and one is like a blank that you would not. Well, maybe it's a zoo.
Plant.
Plant. Phyto means plant. So you guys need to remember that. Phyto means plant. So phytoremediation uses plants. So bioremediation uses bacteria. Phytoremediation uses plants. And I know plants are biological. I didn't name the processes, but that's what the names of these processes are. And plants can be very effective at absorbing and removing toxins. This was part of what we talked about when we talked about water quality and water pollution and control and things like that. The fact that when you remove plants, that's when you get a lot of water pollution problems. This is one of the reasons why, is because plants can absorb toxins. And a lot of times things that are toxic to people don't bother plants. They can absorb, for example, heavy metals. Now, the problem is if something eats those plants after they've absorbed mercury or something like that, then they're going to be poisoned from it, but you just have to monitor that and keep it under control. But with plants, you can plant a whole bunch of them in contaminated soil or water and then harvest them out of there. And take them off, and then you take them to a wastewater or to a hazardous treatment facility and treat them as hazardous waste. But it's an easy way to both absorb the toxins and remove them without a huge amount of environmental impact from doing that, and then dispose of it somewhere else. Okay? Any questions? Alrighty, that's it for hazardous materials.